Some interviews make news. This one was destined for history. When Emma Watson stepped into the bright lights of the Kelly Clarkson show, she expected a typical interview. Her new book, her work on girls' education, and a glimmer of hope. But what she encountered was a relentless and provocative interrogation about her personal life, her understanding of feminism, and her public stance. The host boomed, sending the studio into a roar of applause. "Please applaud! Emma Watson!" As the studio erupted in applause, Emma took the stage. She wore a simple yet elegant light cream suit. She smiled, waved politely to the audience, and after a brief handshake with Kelly, she took her seat. The stage was adorned with pastel colors, the Los Angeles skyline in the background. Kelly leaned forward, a hint of southern warmth radiating from her face. "Welcome to the program, Emma. Or should I say, Miss Hermione Granger," she teased. Emma laughed politely, but there was a cautious glint in her eyes. "Emma will be fine," she said, gently gripping the edge of her chair. The first few minutes were spent in safe spaces, her book project, her UNICEF work, and her fascination with nature. The audience applauded politely, and Emma's answers were measured, clear, and calm. But then Kelly's voice shifted. "You've been vocal about feminism many times," Kelly said, shuffling her cards. "But tell me, your stance against the male-dominated system, was that more of a force field you used to your advantage?" The question fell like a stone in the middle of the studio. Emma's smile faded. She glanced briefly at the audience, then back at Kelly. Her voice was steady, but the subtext was clear. "This is a very personal matter, Kelly, isn't it?" Kelly didn't flinch. She was used to this kind of reaction. In fact, she thrived on it. "Of course it's personal," she said, nodding emphatically. "But you've lived a pretty public life, haven't you? Interviews, books, speeches. You say you want privacy, but at the same time, it's like you're telling all your privates." A slight murmur rose from the audience. Emma's jaw tightened slightly. Her voice became a little clearer. "There's a big difference between telling your own story and allowing others to distort it. Maybe you've never experienced that distinction, Kelly." The studio fell silent for a moment. Some audience members raised their heads. Kelly smiled even wider, sensing she'd touched a nerve. "But don't you think some of the criticism is justified?" she asked. "You've walked away from Hollywood, turned down some projects, made a splash. Don't you think that's a bit of a controlled rebellion?" Emma leaned in toward Kelly. Her eyes were more attentive now, and her tone wasn't sarcastic, but it was still pointed. "I came here to talk about my work. A woman raising her voice is not a rebellion to be questioned for the sake of ratings, especially by someone who has never lived her life." "But still," Kelly said, a slight challenge injected into her voice, "don't you think some of the criticism is valid? Some production companies turned you down. You walked away from Hollywood. There must be a reason for that." Emma leaned in slightly. Her eyes scanned Kelly carefully. "I came here to discuss my projects, Kelly, not to take personal stand," she said. Her voice was still gentle, but each word was carefully chosen, carrying a touch of anger. Kelly raised an eyebrow in mock surprise, but that familiar smile remained on her face. "Don't get me wrong," she said. "I appreciate your work, but don't you think there's a bit of hypocrisy? You say respect my space, and then you share your most intimate memories in the media. Which one?" Emma laughed softly, but it wasn't humor, but a cold internal disappointment. "Duplicity," she said. "The real dilemma is that people think a woman speaking openly about her experiences is sensationalism. There's a fine line between telling and being exposed, Kelly. When I'm the one telling, I can control that. But when someone like you tries to sell their own version of that story, that's where the boundary crossing begins." A faint murmur rang through the hall. Kelly's smile faded, if only slightly. The backstage director frowned and leaned into the cameraman's ear. The atmosphere was slowly but surely building into a storm. But Kelly didn't give up. "Look, Emma," she said with even more confidence, "people want to know the truth. They're wondering, are you still involved in Hollywood? Or have you completely drifted away? Are you no longer connected to the art world?" Emma took a deep breath. She leaned back, clasped her hands. Her voice was colder this time. "Are they curious about the truth, or are they looking for a story they can consume? Because these questions you're asking go beyond simple curiosity. They're a way of trivializing a woman's journey. Kelly blinked slightly. For the first time, genuine surprise crossed her face. "I'm just asking what everyone else is wondering," she said, her voice firmer this time. Emma shook her head. "No, Kelly, you're looking for phrases to fill commercial slots." The studio suddenly fell silent. Some in the audience held their breath. The tension was so palpable that even the oxygen in the air seemed thick. Kelly tapped her cards on the table with the tips of her fingers. Her voice didn't tremble, but her jaw was clenched. "If you don't want to talk about these things, why did you write a book? Isn't that so?" Emma's eyes narrowed slightly. The elegant expression on her face hardened. "Are you actually giving me advice on what not to do?" she asked. "You?" Kelly started to respond, but Emma stopped her with a graceful gesture. Her voice remained steady, but it was clear and poignant. "You don't know what it's like to be judged every moment of your daily life. To try to survive in a life where your successes are attributed to luck, your failures to your personality. And then you find yourself, every word you say is fodder for someone else's agenda." Emma's voice trembled slightly on the last sentence, but her gaze remained unwavering. For the first time, Kelly leaned back in her chair. For the first time, the confident expression on her face weakened. The studio seemed to be empty. Everyone wondered what the next question would be, yet no one dared to ask. In the control room, the producer whispered into her earpiece, her voice laced with panic. "Should we cut to commercial? Now?" But Kelly still hadn't given up. In fact, she was determined to dig deeper. She leaned forward once more. Her voice was soft, but there was steel at the edge of her words. "So, Emma, I'm curious. Have you ever regretted it? Giving up those red carpets, those big movies, that whole glamorous life? Leaving your power in the art world behind? Was it worth it, do you think?" Emma turned to Kelly. A wry smile crossed her lips. "Regret? Well, I regret abandoning structures that prioritize public image over human dignity, turning down offers to give young girls a voice." Some in the audience applauded. Others watched Emma silently. This wasn't an interview anymore. It was a stand. Kelly, however, was prepared. Almost as if rehearsed, she unleashed her next move. "So you're saying you've burned all those bridges, and now I don't care what people who know you think?" Emma's expression froze. Her gaze was icy, her words slow and determined. "If those bridges were built to silence me, then yes, I did. And yes, I have no regrets. Because a woman's ability to express herself shouldn't depend on the approval of others, especially when that approval can only be given if I remain silent." There was a hum in the studio. The temperature rose. The lights began to feel harsher. Kelly lightly adjusted her cards, a tremor in her hands, but her eyes remained defiant. The stage manager signaled for a commercial break, but no one moved. When the camera focused on Emma's clasped hands, then Kelly's narrowed eyes, everyone knew. This wasn't an interview. This was a battle of ideas. When the lights came back on after the commercial, the tension hadn't abated at all. The audience no longer whispered. They simply leaned forward, waiting. They were witnessing a historic moment. Kelly was more theatrical this time. She slowly straightened her cards, plastering a fake smile on her face. "Welcome back. We have Emma Watson in our studio." But Emma quickly interrupted. "Just Emma. We already talked about this, didn't we?" There was a slight laugh from the audience, but Kelly wasn't laughing. She slammed her cards on the table, her voice still polite but growing tense. "Okay, just Emma. Your book and your interviews have been quite a hit, but many people think you turned your back on the institutions you've shown loyalty to. You betrayed the system that made you who you are. What do you say to that?" Emma's jaw tightened slightly, but her tone remained steady but sharp. "Here's what I find interesting," she said. "People talk about loyalty to the institution, but they never talk about loyalty to the individual. I was trapped in the system for years, turning a blind eye. But when that system is used to silence women, let alone protect others, silence becomes a crime, not loyalty." Kelly raised her eyebrows. "Did that break you? Or did it just hurt your pride?" The words hit like a slap in the face, but Emma didn't blink. She just turned to him, looked him in the eye. I grew up in a system that remained silent while paparazzi flashes flashed in my face after my mother's funeral. And you're telling me this was just a matter of pride? The air in the room was choked. No one could breathe. And everyone waited, eager to see what else might happen. Emma's voice remained steady. No scream, no trembling tone. Many people talk about loyalty to the institution, but not many talk about loyalty to people. I was loyal for years, more than I should have been, and it was making me lose my identity. Kelly raised her eyebrows as if she'd caught something. Did it make me lose my identity, or did it just hurt your ego? Her words hung in the air like a slap. Emma turned to Kelly, her hands clasped in her lap. Her knuckles were white. Really, Kelly? She said slowly. Is it just an ego thing to watch the system, the media, and the male-dominated industry try to swallow you whole at such a young age? Is it honor or cowardice to see the mistakes of others and remain silent? Kelly raised her hand, supposedly to soften, but the edge remained in her tone. We all admire you, Emma, but that doesn't justify you throwing stones at the people who raised you, especially those who have dedicated years to the film industry. Emma's chair creaked slightly, shifting forward. Her eyes were no longer clear but determined. The system that made me lose my mother was also the same one that silenced women and commodified child actors. And now you're going to tell me how that system helped me? A few people in the studio gasped. Kelly tensed her shoulders. She held her head high with a confident sense of triumph. So you still care what they think? She asked. Or do you only settle scores with the system as long as it reflects positively on you? A murmur rose in the studio. Some turned their heads in shock. Others stood still. Emma shook her head and laughed dryly. You really don't understand anything, she said. You sit here behind a desk, questioning other people's lives, and you think you're a judge. But you're making decisions about a life you haven't lived. Is this your job, or just a power play you enjoy? Kelly's gaze turned cold. Her voice filtered with a sarcastic subtlety. Oh, sorry, I forgot, only your opinion mattered. After all, when people like you talk, it's vision. When we talk, it's ratings. Emma's jaw clenched. Her voice was near a whisper, but the microphone caught every syllable clearly. Don't call me that. Her words were short but trembling. At that moment, the studio was silent. Kelly leaned forward. She folded her hands. Her smile was now just a line. I'm just wondering, Emma, Mom, she said. Has this system really excluded you, or have you simply chosen to leave to maintain your relevance? That sentence froze in the air. Emma's shoulders tensed. Heat spread across her cheeks, but her gaze remained fixed and hard. You think this was a battle for attention. To you, it's all about the camera, the attention, the trends. But you don't know what it's like for a woman to live under a microscope, her every move questioned. The cameras now captured not just facial expressions, but the pulsating reality. Kelly leaned back with a grim smile, but Emma's every word echoed off the walls of an established order. Living a life where every move is criticized, every breath analyzed, every headline alienates you from who you are. Emma's voice didn't crack, but it carried an undercurrent of anger. And you still think this is about getting attention? Kelly didn't move. On the contrary, she pressed on. But look, Emma, she said, her smile artificial. All this withdrawal, your desire for privacy, followed by book deals, documentary projects, cover interviews. Don't you think it's a bit contradictory to be so visible and yet claim to want privacy? This time, Emma raised her voice a little for the first time. A few people in the room involuntarily backed away. You don't get to choose how I tell my story, Kelly. My life isn't part of your ratings machine. Your gossip culture is a continuation of a cogwheel no different from what my mother experienced. There was a murmur in the studio. Breaths were short. Kelly winked. She stumbled for the first time at the anger, but quickly recovered. Her voice was now sarcastic. So we've finally reached your soft spot. Maybe you should admit it, Emma. Part of this circus is your doing. Emma stood abruptly. Her chair tipped back slightly. Her fingers clenched as she pointed at Kelly's table. You have no right to tell me what to do here. You weren't there. You didn't live it. You didn't see it with your own eyes. The audience froze. A few people in the front row leaned back. The physical effects of the tension palpable. Kelly was quieter, but still stubborn. I've lived in the public eye, Emma. I've been criticized too, but I take responsibility for the choices I've made. Do you? Emma's eyes narrowed. She spoke through gritted teeth. You're truly incredible. Kelly leaned forward again, as if to deliver the final blow. And here you are, selling your story. Isn't that what we all do? Emma took a deep breath. She tried to calm down, but even her breath was trembling. This interview, she said softly, each word sharp as poison, is a disgrace. Oh. And she stood. She was looking down at Kelly now. Her hands were planted on the table, her knuckles tense. The studio was silent now. Even the cameramen were hesitant to turn their cameras. Kelly was still sitting, but she no longer had that confident smile on her face. She didn't look away, but she was secretly taking a step back. Kelly wasn't backing down, but that arrogant smile on her face was slowly beginning to crack. If you're going to storm out, get out now, she finally said. Her voice was cold, but her hands were shaking slightly. Her nerves were frayed. Emma looked at Kelly sharply. Her jaw was clenched, as if she were swallowing more painful words that might come at any moment. Then she took a deep breath. Her chest rose and fell. No, she said. Her voice was low but vibrating. We're not done yet. Kelly crossed her arms and leaned back in the chair. Great. So let's talk about your feminist heroism, shall we? Because you act like the world owes you and Megan a perpetual tale of victimhood. When will this end? When will you take responsibility? An audible ooh rose from the audience. A few people shifted. Emma paused for a few seconds. She nodded slightly. Then she fixed her gaze on Kelly. A victimhood story. How easy that line is for people who commodify their lives for ratings. Kelly's eyes narrowed. We ask tough questions here, Emma. If that bothers you, maybe the real issue is, how sincere is the career you've built over the years by saying, I was wronged? Emma turned slowly to Kelly. Her voice was louder now, her words clipped and deliberate. Are you listening to yourself? From this seat where you dispense judgment, you're making decisions about my life, as if you've ever lived a day in my shoes, as if money erases trauma, as if being thrust in front of the cameras at a young age is a minor problem. Kelly was about to say something, but Emma cut her off. Here her voice filled the studio. You're used to watching women crying in front of the press, watching silent stories and being entertained. And then you come along and think it's all just acting. Who do you think you are, Kelly? The room went cold. The audience held their breath. The silence was practically dead. Some in the audience averted their gazes. Others were fixated on Emma's trembling but resolute stance. Kelly's face tightened. Her eyes were glassy, but she had no intention of giving up. She squared her shoulders. I'm doing my job, Emma, and unlike you, at least I'm not running away. Instead of fighting, you walked away. From responsibilities, from the industry, from people, and then you expect pity. The sentence cut through the room like a knife. Emma's face went stony. After a moment of silence, she placed her hand on the table. I didn't run away, she said. I protected those who loved me, my children, my sisters, a generation growing up motherless. Every woman silenced. This isn't running, this is fighting. Kelly squinted. Oh, please, let's skip the savior rhetoric. You're just like everyone else now. You're cashing in on your pain, and you don't even know it. Emma leaned forward slowly. Her voice was a whisper, but her sentences were sharp as razor. No, I know, and that's the scariest part. Because unless you understand pain, you don't respect it. And I'm here to remind you that I'm not just an agenda for you. Not a sound fell from the studio. The cameras were fixed, hands were shaking. The sound of Emma hitting the table echoed throughout the studio. Emma's hands were clasped, her eyes fixed on Kelly. I didn't abandon anyone, she said. Her voice had risen now, echoing a pent-up storm within her. I protected my family, my voice, my values. These may be foreign to you. Kelly flinched for a moment, but quickly regained her composure. This time her voice was condescending, sarcastic. Please, let's skip the noble mission stuff. You're not protecting anyone. You're just a celebrity cashing in on a good tragedy. And the most tragic part? You even believe this whole story yourself. Emma leaned forward slowly. Her eyes were almost touching Kelly's now. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it was so dangerous, so clear, that the studio froze. "The real tragedy," he said, "is that people like you turn other people's pain into a spectacle and then mistake it for journalism. What you're doing is parasitism." A timid hum suddenly rose from the room. Some audience members turned their heads, others looked at Emma with admiration. Even her co-hosts, who had been silent beside Kelly, shifted uneasily in their chairs. Kelly pursed her lips. She leaned in with a forced smile. "Is it over, Princess?" he said sarcastically. Emma's gaze froze. This time her eyes were tired but sharp. "Don't call me that, especially not you." Kelly bowed her head, still smiling. "Why, because you're embarrassed or because you know you no longer deserve that title?" The studio was silent. Emma said nothing for a moment. Her eyes never left Kelly's. Then she stood up slowly. This time she wasn't rushing, not with anger. She was standing with determination. "You really don't know where to stand, do you?" Kelly was still trying to grin, but her voice was trembling slightly. "We don't back down here. We'll ask questions. If you can't handle it, I'll tell you not to come back next time." Emma shook her head. She didn't laugh. She just breathed softly. "You call this journalism? This isn't journalism. This is theater. It's not the search for truth. It's attacking the easiest target. And you know what you're reminding me of? One of the biggest problems in this world, an artificial system blind to human suffering, a system that delights in humiliation and manipulates the masses." The last word landed like a slap. "You're pathetic." The words sharpened in the air. Kelly's face went blank for a moment. Her co-anchors averted their gazes. But Kelly lunged forward with one last spurt. Her voice was like a whip. "And you're a pampered celebrity who can't stand not being the center of attention. You want respect? Earn it. You can't just ask for it." This was her final statement. But this time, Emma went even further. She pressed her palm against the table. Her voice rose, a tone so loud it sent shivers through everyone in the room. "Respect? You tear people apart every day to collect ratings. Who are you? By what right do you insult someone's character, their life, like this?" The audience was no longer breathing. The lights were pounding harder. The studio was in absolute silence, preceded by an explosion. Emma Watson wasn't just giving an interview anymore. In that moment, she was shouting the truth. "And you are one of the biggest problems in this world." Emma's words echoed in the air. Kelly froze for a moment. Her expression faltered. The audience fell silent. No one dared to breathe. Emma's chest rose and fell, her eyes ablaze with a burning fire. Kelly rose slowly from the chair. They both stood now, inches apart, eyes locked, motionless. Two storms ready to collide. Kelly leaned forward slightly. Her voice was a whisper, but her words were like a knife. "This is my stage, and you must go now." Emma's lips curved upward. Not a smile. It was a cold expression of inner resolve. "I will go," she said. "But first, let everyone see clearly who you are here." Silence fell again between the two. Every studio audience knew the final confrontation was only a matter of time. The cameras zoomed in with shaky focus, the stage tensing. At that moment, Kelly broke the silence. Her voice was scathing, like hissing venom. "Do you want to humiliate me on my own stage? In front of this audience?" Emma took a step closer. Her eyes were unwavering. "No," she said slowly. "You're the one doing that." A loud "ah" echoed through the studio. The audience flinched for a moment. Kelly's face flushed. Anger and shame settled on her cheeks simultaneously. "You're crossing the line," Kelly said, her voice cracked. Emma bowed her head. "You drew the line, Kelly. I simply pointed out the injustice of that line." Kelly took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. "This isn't a refuge. Questions are asked here. If you avoid the answers, it's not showboating, it's running away." Emma's voice dropped once more, but the emphasis within was steely. "No, you don't ask questions. You accuse, you distort. You provoke people to rage, then you witness their anger and sit back. This isn't journalism, serving this torture with a smile." Kelly's hands clenched into fists. Some in the audience bowed their heads in shame. Others, still clutching their phones, waited as if witnessing history. Kelly spoke through clenched teeth. If you can't stand it, then you should have stayed in your palace. That sentence caused every wall Emma had patiently built to crack. At that moment, she placed her hands on the table. The glass trembled. Some audience members reflexively recoiled. Her voice boomed. I left that palace because it wasn't mine, because my voice wasn't valued there. I was silenced because I was a woman, because I was young, because I wanted to make a difference. Her voice echoed through the hall. Every word shook the studio walls. And now here, someone like you is telling me what I should do, what I deserve. You know nothing. What I've lost, what I've lived, what I've fought for. The cameras were fixed. The audience was frozen. Emma Watson wasn't just talking anymore. She was taking a stand. You're talking about my life. The studio was silent. The band's drummer in the corner was frozen, holding his drumsticks in the air. The audience was gasping for air. The grin on Kelly's face finally faded. But with one last effort, she approached Emma and narrowed her eyes. You're acting exactly like everyone says, Emma, she said, her voice no longer sarcastic but aggressive. A spoiled activist who can't handle reality. You act like the world owes you something. Emma's expression faded, then suddenly became cold and still. Without taking her eyes off Kelly, she spoke. Her voice echoed with an eerie calm. Choose your words carefully, Kelly. Kelly crossed her arms across her chest defiantly. What's going to happen? Emma slowly straightened. She stood in all her glory. Her eyes pointed not at Kelly, but at her seat. You think you're safe, because there are people in this studio, in front of these cameras, applauding you. But one day, people will wake up, and they'll see what a hostile nature you hide behind that cute presenter mask. Kelly rolled her eyes. And you will be remembered as the star who couldn't face real truths, the one who ran away when she couldn't handle the outside world. Get out. The words echoed in the air. Emma paused for a moment. Her eyes were lost. Then her lips curved, a cold but graceful smile. You've said something honest for the first time. She took a slow step back. She adjusted the cuff of her jacket. Then she turned to the audience. Her eyes scanned the entire room. You all heard it. You all saw it. This show is about no empathy, no accountability, no search for truth. It's pain transformed into entertainment. Some in the audience bowed their heads. Some were staring at their phone screens. Emma's voice rose, full but jarring. I came here to talk about my work, my projects, the things I believe in. But this program chose not to hurt me, and you all watched. She paused for a moment. Her eyes slowly turned to Kelly. This time her voice sharpened. I've seen worse people like you. I've emerged from bigger structures. But remember this. When the camera turns off, all that's left is your own conscience, and you have to live with it. Kelly stumbled for a moment. The tension in her jaw loosened, but she quickly regained her composure. Security, she shouted. Her voice was unnecessarily loud, filled with a false authority. 2 security guards approached, their steps hesitant. But Emma raised her hand. No need. Her voice was firm. I'm leaving anyway, not because you fired me, because I won't stay in this toxic atmosphere for another second. She began to walk slowly. Just as she reached the door, she paused once more. She turned around and looked at Kelly one last time. If you're looking for victims, Kelly, look in the mirror. The one who's in the most pain is you. Then the door closed with a quiet but resolute click. An explosive silence hung in the hall. Some in the audience applauded, others booed, but everyone was a witness to a historic moment. Kelly returned to her table. Her cheeks were flushed, her breathing ragged. The director shouted for publicity, but it was too late. Social media was ablaze. Emma Watson's last words had gone viral before she even got into her car. As she walked outside in the cool evening air, Emma looked up. Her face was stern, but her eyes were calm. She had gone there for an interview. But on her way out, she had destroyed the stage. And everyone knew who started the fire, but she would never forget who walked away with honor. If you enjoyed this striking story, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Emma was right, or did she overstep the mark? We look forward to your comments.